Sorry, I always have to sort of forgive that. There is a bit where it says, for anyone who doesn't know the sort of behind the scenes of YouTube and its thing, there is a bit that says go live or you're live. And I've always got to wait, like, am I recording from there or am I recording for waiter to get out the way? So that's why there's a little pause at the end. But we are live. This is the Baldwin Sports Media NFL Daily Update, where I like to expand on points that I've made. You know, if you follow my social medias, you'll see that on TikTok, for instance, I break down a couple of news stories and to give my quick opinion on it. But on that platform, and because I also post it to Instagram as well, I keep that to a minute and between a minute and 30 seconds. Whereas here, I've got a little bit more time, so I can talk about it and talk a little bit more about what it is and go into a little bit more depth about the news around the NFL this week. Very much a slow day when it comes to the NFL, but not not totally deserted. There are still some stories that we need to get into, and we will start with what I would like to think is the biggest news of the day, and that's the fact that Dan Quinn has. Well, I don't know if it's Dan Quinn, but the news is that the Washington Commanders have finally filled their head coaching space, which means that all head coaching spaces are now filled from the 7 or 8. I forget what the number is off the top of my head. Vacancies that were at the start of at the end of the season rather. They're all now filled, and Dan Quinn is going to be the guy taking over. Bonky dog, left away. Just stay there. Taking over the Washington Commanders, obviously moving from the NFC, moving within the NFC East from the Dallas Cowboys, where he was defensive coordinator, to the Washington Commanders now as a head coach. And on my podcast, I sort of said, or on my TikTok rather, I said, I like this move to an extent because I do still have some hesitancy when it comes to defensive coaches taking the reins in the league today, because as I've said before, and I will repeat it because it is still a pretty good stat, but if you take Bill Belichick away, for the most part, offensive guys are the guys that are winning and going deep into the playoffs, and there's been no defensive coordinator or defensive minded head coach that has won a Super Bowl since Pete Carroll when he was with the Seahawks, ironically when Dan Quinn was his defensive coordinator. So it's hard to win in this league if you do not have an offensive, or at least lean offensive mind. So that's why, when it was Mike McDonald, for instance, taking over at the Seahawks, or Raheem Morris taking over at the Falcons, there was always that level of, right, have they made the right move here? Should they have gone with the other side of the ball, for instance? But when it comes to Dan Quinn, I think there's a little bit difference to it. But because the fact he's been a head coach before, I think that changes the narrative ever so slightly when it comes to how you when it comes to how you see it. And it also plays into the fact that if you look at his time with the Atlanta Falcons, he had Kyle Shanahan as his offensive coordinator. And we've seen what Kyle Shanahan has been able to do, and we know what he brings to the table as one of the greatest offensive gurus and play callers and play coordinators that we've had in the league. So that sort of helps it. That sort of helped him rather in Atlanta. Now he goes to the Washington Commanders with Eric Bieniemy. And again, when you talk about Eric Bieniemy, there is always that thing of, right, who was the most responsible when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs and part of that dynasty. Now, was it Andy Reid, who's obviously got a long history of success? Is it Patrick Mahomes, who is, some seeing as the greatest quarterback of all time, or at least putting himself in that discussion? Or was it Eric Bieniemy? Well, we've seen with Eric Bieniemy this past year with Sam Howell. Again, didn't necessarily put him in MVP conversations, but brought him up a tier, I think we can say, from what we maybe expected him to do, and had a very good season. So if Dan Quinn can repeat, basically set the same formula up that he had in Atlanta, say, right, I'll take care of the defense, and then this offensive genius, if you want to use that word on Eric Bieniemy, have him work that way. If that's the way you want to do it, and then we'll see what goes on from there. Add some pieces. Obviously, they do have the most cap space to work with this offseason, so there will likely be some signings. Whether or not they are going to take, or maybe move up the draft to get someone like Caleb Williams or Drake May, one of the big quarterback names that are coming out in the draft. There is a lot of potential for Dan Quinn to take the defensive side of the ball, Eric Bieniemy to take the offensive side of the ball, and just have the two mesh together. And I think that's something that could prove to be a successful trait for the Atlanta Falcons, and not the Atlanta Falcons, but it worked for the Atlanta Falcons, but for the Washington Commanders and Dan Quinn moving forward. So whilst it is a defensive coach, I think using the philosophy that he's had beforehand, and now with a guy like Eric Bieniemy at the helm, and maybe with the quarterback, I think that there is potential for this to be a very, very astute signing. And also, when you've got the seniority as well, and again the track of being a head coach, that also helps as well, as opposed to these coaches rather, who are going into being the head coaches for the very first time. That gives them an advantage. So I think on the down low, it's a pretty nice move. By the way, I finally managed to get my mug properly in shot. So now you can see my wife's lovely gift there. Now, moving on to the second portion of our conversation. This concerns the Dallas Cowboys and Micah Parsons. Now, Micah Parsons, since he since he's entered the league, has been a terrific player. Like there were comparisons, or there have been some comparisons with the likes of Lawrence Taylor, who many regard to be the greatest defensive player of all time, and they play the sort of same position as an edge or coming off the edge rusher. And those comparisons and those claims are not far fetched. You know what he's brought to the table these 3 years. He's sort of established himself as the guy, and I think it's only a matter of time before he goes on and wins Defensive Player of the Year. For instance, it is he is a lock, and he is that franchise-defining level of player. And the Cowboys have got to absolutely hit a home run with him. And with that being said, I think with that comes a level of authority that he gets a chance to, shall we say, clap back, I think is the term that the kids use these days. But he has a chance, he has the authority to stand up and have his voice heard properly amongst the media, and when it comes to within the organization. Where if he says something, it has some merit, even though he's incredibly young. And he was talking on his own podcast, which is The Edge with Micah Parsons. But I've got the quote here from Pro Football Talk. And basically, he has gone in on the organization when it comes to how the team handled, or how the team rather performed during their loss to the Green Bay Packers. And that disastrous start that they had. Yes, they sort of made 48-32. If you look at that as just a score, you think, oh, that wasn't too bad. But the way they particularly started off that game, that was a disaster. That was a disaster for them, and I don't think many people saw that coming, especially the way the Cowboys had come into it with, winning the NFC East, for instance, and the performances and the numbers that they put up on both sides of the ball. As I just take another drink. But basically, he's come out and said again on his podcast, but I'm quoting via Pro Football Talk, we were just outperformed, out-schemed, however you want to put it, Parsons said. Like they had an answer for everything. And people saying, well, why didn't you go to linebacker? Because, they said you could stop the run. Well, guess what? The packages are in for me to go to linebacker. There's multiple packages, multiple variations, but I can only play what is called. Whatever the call is, whatever personnel they're putting on. I'm not putting out personnel. I'm not putting out the calls. Nothing's coming from me. So you could put that wherever you want to be or wherever you want to put it, but they're not coming from me. Basically putting the coaches and the organizations as a whole on blast for the way that they handled that game. Now, I think something like that is probably going to be a very, very telling sign and a very productive thing for him to say again. If this was coming from some rookie, for instance, a third string cornerback, for instance, I don't think it handles anything. But for the best guy, I would argue, best defensive player in the NFC East, maybe even the best defensive player in the NFC, if you want to include the likes of, Nick Bosa, for instance. There are names that are escaping me right now, but it really is those two, 1 and 2. But he's certainly in the discussion, is Micah Parsons. When it comes from someone like him, that is the warning sign and the alarm bells and the kick up the backside, shall we say, that a team like the Dallas Cowboys need, because it is fair to say that the Cowboys need something done with them, because we have seen with Mike McCarthy, even going back all those years, if you want to have it as a Dak Prescott issue, although it's not necessarily a Dak Prescott issue, but since Dak Prescott has been here, they've gotten so far, but they just cannot get over the edge. Still have not been to the NFC Championship game, for instance, when they have had some incredible teams. Now, even going as far as say that team when Dak Prescott rather was a rookie, with that great offensive line with Ezekiel Elliott as the rookie and Dak Prescott, they had all the pieces there to try and make a success of it, but they didn't. And fair enough, the first, they kept running into Aaron Rodgers, and it was Aaron Rodgers, I believe, in that rookie year. So there are some other factors in it, but the Dallas Cowboys need to do something, because when you have this level of talent and especially with Mike Parsons set to get paid, and he will get paid. It really is a situation of like a now or never for them because when you've got him, you've got CD Lamb, they'll need to be paid. There's talk about what Dak Prescott is going to need in terms of a contract. So you've got to factor that in as well. They need to start winning a Super Bowl and they need to start winning a Super Bowl fast because otherwise, this is all going to crumble away and they are not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to afford all the pieces that they need, and they're going to have to restart and start from square one. So I applaud Micah Parsons for again stepping up and calling it like it is. He didn't sort of shy away from it and just give a cliche answer. Oh, we could have done better. I could. He went full blast on them, and again, I appreciate him, and I can understand him wanting to kick things into gear and kick the organization up the backside because, as I said, they need it and they need it pretty soon. Away from we'll go from off the field technically to on the field news, and tonight is the start of the Pro Bowl games. Now, the Pro Bowl has gone through many iterations over the years, and whether or not you like it, that's not really the debate. I liked the old Pro Bowl as it was, with the NFC versus the AFC, an actual game. I can understand why some people didn't like it, especially the time of the year when it was, after the Super Bowl and everything. Like it's sort of it's not quite the same because you've got the grand stage of them all and the Super Bowl and everything and all the fireworks and all the pantry and everything, and then it's just a friendly, a practice game effectively and played at practice speed as well. So I can understand. I personally liked it, but I can understand why they thought they may need to change. So okay, let's bring it to before the Super Bowl, and let's have that sort of what's the phrase, appetizer, aperitif, or whatever, or hors d'oeuvre, the or before the main course of the Super Bowl. That sort of made a little bit more sense. It meant you got some of the big games or big names rather out the way because players don't want to do it before they go to the Super Bowl, but that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's not really for anything. It doesn't quite have the prestige as like the All-Star game does for Major League Baseball and the pageantry that goes along around it. The MLB already done, the NBA and the NHL All-Star games, which of course in the middle of the season. But at the same time, there are still people watching it and who want to take part. Like I've got the numbers here. So, for instance, this was via Statista that I looked up, and the numbers have been pretty good. Like last year, for instance, 6.2 million viewers tuned in for the Super Bowl, the actual the Sunday game, because now it's sort of been broken down into the skills competition, which is tonight, and a whole bunch of other games, and then the flag football on the Sunday. They tried to make a change. I can see it working, but again, I'm still a traditionalist. I like the old Pro Bowl. Even the two teams where you selected, I quite like that as well. The draft and who wanted to go on that. But the fact is that while some people like the Super Bowl, not everyone likes the Super Bowl, and that's best described with those viewing numbers. And again, taken from the same source, Statista. So the figures it goes back further, but this is just the example that they gave. In 2014, the viewing figures for the Pro Bowl were 11.3 million, so pretty good. But it's steadily gone down. 2015, it was 8.7. 2016, 7.9, 7.4, 8.5, 8.2, 8.0. There was the 1 year of COVID in 2021. There was 1.8, but that's because it was completely changed. So we don't really count that into effect. But 6.6 million in 2022 and 6.2 in 2023. As I just mentioned, there is a slow decline there. And I want to give a shout out to Matt. I did practice his name beforehand, but now it's sort of Matt Matt Verderame from Sports Illustrated. I implore you to go out and actually read the article. It's from Sports Illustrated and it's titled, "Hey, Roger Goodell, it's time to fix the Pro Bowl." So I, again, implore you, go check it out. Brilliant article. But he's come up with a number of suggestions that I just want to talk through about changing the Pro Bowl and getting it to, making it more relevant or making it better. And let's just break down what he has said. And some of them I actually do quite like. So keep the skills competition, but only allow coaches to vote on Pro Bowlers. That one I like because the Pro Bowl, as I say, it doesn't really matter for anything, so there's not really that too much importance aligned to it. But there are certain like players who have it in contracts that make it, if they get selected to the Pro Bowl, it's a bonus. and what have you. But at the end of the day, it is a popularity contest. And if we are going to tie a Pro Bowl appearance to things like that and bonuses and a level of prestige as well, because that is factored into like Hall of Fame voting as well, it has to be exclusive and legitimate. Not well, not legitimate. That's a bad way of telling it, but again, prestigious and exclusive, shall we say? So opening up to fan votes, which I know a large part of the Pro Bowl vote is down to the fans, kind of dilutes it a little bit because then fans of one team can spam to have their one player go in, which is why you end up with the rather weird situation last year where Tyler Huntley went to the Pro Bowl, even though he'd only played like 4 games, I think, and throw, I think it was 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. But because of he was the vote getter, that's who went to the Pro Bowl. So it kind of again dilutes the accomplishments and achievements of a bunch of other quarterbacks around the league. Again, there would have been some pullouts. Again, Tyler Huntley was way down the list as a reserve. But even so, if you have a Pro Bowl as a vote by the coaches, that offers a level of prestige, and it sort of takes away any chance of foul play or stuffing the ballot box, as it were, to use a political term. Um, in terms of getting people who don't necessarily deserve to be there. If you sort of get what I'm getting, so he proposes just having it as the coaches. Perfectly, I think that's absolutely fine. Again, if you want to then have it as still as the ranking, and if Patrick Mahomes gets the most votes for the AFC, but he's in the Super Bowl, then you've got to go with 2, 3, 4, but 4 is injured. Whatever, fine. If that's how it is, because whatever reason players have to pull out or can't make it, fine. But just give it that level of prestige and honor, and have the coaches vote for. It's a way to do it. Coaches vote for the Pro Bowl, media vote for All Pro. Everyone wins. If you want to have the players in there as well, fine, voting for themselves, that's fine. At the end of the day, that's who they're going to be sharing the Pro Bowl with. But go for it. Let's go for it. I quite like that suggestion. That's a good one. The second one, move the game back to Hawaii and put it after the season again. It was his suggestion. Now, again, I quite like the idea of having it before the Super Bowl. Just against, it just doesn't feel right to have a mini game after the big game. So keeping it that week beforehand, I quite like. But moving the game back to Hawaii, that's an interesting one because I quite like the idea of moving the game around away, much in the same way that the NFL has done with the draft and realize, oh, it's a moneymaker. It's a great way to, go to different markets that, don't usually get the Super Bowl, for instance, for whatever reason. But now we can take the draft on the board. Do with the Pro Bowl, for instance. I quite like to see that. Again, Hawaii was fine, but I can understand why, because now the stadium in Honolulu is not quite what it was. That's why the University of Hawaii used to play at the same stadium. They've moved on to their own. They moved out on their own because there's like corrosion, I think, because of the salt um, uh, rusting away some of the bits of the stadium. So they've had to move it away. And again, the Pro Bowl has moved. They kept it to the site of the Super Bowl to make it a whole Super Bowl week. Either way, they've tried to bump it around, and I quite like it. I don't like the idea of it being in one venue every year. I like the idea of moving it around. Even if you want to keep it in the same way as the Super Bowl is predominantly in warm weather cities, because you don't want to have the Pro Bowl outside or whatever in snowy conditions of Cleveland. Say, if you want to keep it that way, that's fine as well. If you just want to keep it in the South or in California, fine. We can sort of find a middle ground there. But keeping it in one place, I just don't get. Again, we've seen the hype and the money generated that things like the draft bring to all these various cities. Why not do the same with the Pro Bowl? Again, if a team isn't going to get a Super Bowl, for instance, like I don't think Jacksonville's getting a Super Bowl, for instance, anytime soon, just because of logistics are there. They had it once, but there was some problems, so I don't think it's going anytime soon. But give Jacksonville a Pro Bowl, and then next year give it to Charlotte, for instance, in Carolina. Next year, then go to, sake of argument, Houston, and then to Dallas, which, by the way, still has only hosted one Super Bowl. That's a whole different issue. But again, if you want to make the Pro Bowl a big thing, 100,000 people at Jerry World, make it big there. So I don't necessarily agree with moving it after the Super Bowl, but in terms of a different venue, with his point, I don't agree with that as well. I think share the love, share it around, give more fans and give more fans, more cities, more stadiums the chance to get involved. So that would be my take on that. The final one is basically on the games that they play, and this one again I do kind of like. Have players tried to defeat different carnival games? An instant moneymaker. Now, obviously, it's not. We've seen the skills games, and they've sort of changed over the years. Now we've got dodgeball, for instance. There's still the traditional ones with the tic tac toe with the long snappers, the punters. Excuse me, and the kickers. But he's sort of gone a different way with this and wants to get old school carnival games in there as well. So, for instance, he's got this is a moneymaker. Give us defensive linemen swinging a sledgehammer to see who hits the bell the fastest. A strength competition for the defensive and even the offensive lineman. Fine, love it. I quite like that. Wouldn't that be a great, thing of pride to take home and say, right, I am the strongest lineman in the NFL, and maybe even, have that as a badge of honor, whatever. Great. Quarterbacks attempting to throw darts at tiny balloons. Great way to test accuracy. Again, I like you've seen the old footage, the moving target and the ball that's got the dab of paint at one end and they've got to hit the target. Great game, but hitting tiny balloons, love it. Linebackers trying to score a basket on a 20-foot hoop. So that's the rigged basketball game that everyone knows about, where the ball's slightly too big and slightly too inflated, and the rim isn't quite the same, and it's higher up than it's used to. The rigged game. I quite like to do that. He said, doesn't make sense. No, but it's incredibly entertaining. Again, whilst we're going on the weird games or weird style games that we've got at the moment, that doesn't seem like a bad shout. I mean, let's make it as long as possible. Make an all day competition for all I care. Yeah, don't just have it. Don't just have it at night. Have it all the way through the day. Have it from 12 till 9. Again, people can still watch on their watching their phones during their breaks at work, and social media clips will come in. So you'll still get variety. You'll still get a variety of viewers. So just add it out. More games, more time. So those are the changes to the Pro Bowl that he's sort of gone through. Again, I like some of them. Some of them I'm not so sure. What do you guys think of the Pro Bowl? By the way, I want to know what you guys think. So let me know in the chat or in the comments below, and we'll see if we can address it on the next show. Right now, there is one more bit of news. Oh yes, and that is the fact that Taylor Swift is having an impact on the Super Bowl. And I love the fact that I said in the TikTok, I said in the video, the more people are interested in the NFL is a great thing. And if Taylor Swift is bringing in more female fans than traditionally were there, great. Again, I did a TikTok on it. Go check out my channel at Baldwin Sports Media, where I sort of broke down why Taylor Swift having her is a good thing for the NFL. But now it turns out that she's having an impact on the Super Bowl before she's even made it, if she is going to make it, because there is the whole story about whether or not Taylor Swift's going to be able to make the Super Bowl because she's playing in Tokyo. I've got to see if I can get the way the time right. On the same day, but because of the way Japan is so far ahead time-wise, ahead of Mountain Time in Las Vegas, it's sort of basically it'll be yesterday when she's starting. You get the whole deal, but basically there's a she's playing in Tokyo and she needs to get to the Super Bowl, and there's a very, very short window in which she could possibly do it. So whether or not she makes it is a different thing. But she's already having an impact on the Super Bowl because there are sponsors who are now advertising or looking to advertise at the Super Bowl for the very first time or the first time in a long time. So let me see if I can just get it up because I did save it on Twitter. So as we all know, whilst I just looked this up to give a brief thing, we know that there are a lot of people who tune in for the Super Bowl for a variety of reasons. Whether it be just the fact that it's the big game and everyone watches it, and there's viewing parties, and everyone just people just want to be involved. That's fine. If you're that person who just watches one game a year, fine. Welcome to the NFL. There are some who like to tune in for the halftime show. Again, it's Usher this year. I'm not the biggest Usher fan, but if you want to tune in for that, go for it. There are some who tune in just for the adverts. Again, weird people, but given the way that again has become part of the culture and part of the game day experience or whatever, the adverts and who's got the best one, who made the wrong step or whatever. It's fun. So if you want to watch for that, that's fine. But on the subject of adverts, basically, this is a story from Front Office Sports. They're saying, Health and beauty brands have begun paying millions for national Super Bowl commercials. So NYX Pro Makeup are putting up their first ever Super Bowl commercial. ELF Cosmetics, their first ever, and Dove, the first in 18 years. That kind of tells you the draw that Taylor Swift is having. They know that there are going to be more female fans watching this Super Bowl, possibly than ever before. In fact, I will be stunned if this is not the most watched Super Bowl because of the Taylor Swift factor involved. And again, people wanted to tune in to see whether or not Taylor Swift, again, whether or not she makes it. But as I said, the more Taylor Swift, the more money that is coming into the NFL, the more that is good for us as fans. Because as TV revenue gets more, it gets larger and larger and larger. And this is the same thing that goes on in the Premier League as well. With more money being dictated and money from coming in from the broadcasters, what they want to do is the teams will want to make sure they have a good product to sell. And the one way to do that is to sell out stadiums and to get noise and to get atmosphere and to get all that sort of stuff. So if more money is coming in from things like Taylor Swift and buying merchandise, and now with the extra viewers she's bringing in, broadcasters might be able to ask for more from advertisers, and that money then goes to the league, which goes to the teams, and all that trickle down effect. If that's what happens, prices on tickets should be coming down as well, or at least staying the same. And then when it comes to inflation, it sort of works out the same. That is my hope, and that's my belief on what is going to happen. Is if we have these big celebrities again, Taylor Swift might just be the first. Again, I'm sure there will be, down the line, there will be another celebrity that does this, that brings the new audience, shall we say. The more that happens, the better it is for us as fans, because we will then be able to go to games for a little bit cheaper, and have a little bit more of an enjoyable experience when it comes to games as a result. So again, all this talk about Taylor Swift and how she's dominating the NFL or dominating the landscape or whatever, or TV crews are obsessed with her, however you want to put it. Again, she's not, because she's on screen for a very, very small percentage. If you want more details, go and watch the Colin Cowherd rant on his socials or on his platform. Brilliant rant again. Taylor Swift fans have found Colin Cowherd, and he made a great defense of it. But yeah, Taylor Swift is only on for a very, very short amount of time, but it's still bringing a huge amount in comparison to the amount of time she's on screen. And that's going to be good for fans. So you may get annoyed with it, but in the long run, it will be a lot more beneficial. Simple as that. Anyway, we have hit full time on this. Thanks very much for watching. Again, as I've said, leave me comments, leave me questions. My links to my other social medias are down below, so feel free to hit me on there and subscribe and like and comment, and however you want to interact. I'm all for interaction. I will never shy away. I would never shy away from interactions, as long as it's sensible, by the way. Yeah, I'll never shy away. So if you guys want to get involved, feel free to do so. And again, the plan is to keep doing these things live and to get more interaction moving forward. But yeah, that's really it. So until next time, you guys all take care, and we will see you tomorrow.